Hey, Merry Holidays. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for your patience. Um, the last video that I did, I talked a little bit and very quickly about depression. And I really want to expound on that conversation. I want to spend a bit of time on that for a couple reasons. It's pretty important because I do feel like a lot of people, the data is clear. It shows super high numbers right now of young people and people across the country experiencing depression at pretty high rates. It's clear that it shows a lot of people experiencing anxiety at really high rates, and those two things tend to operate hand in hand. And I just want to address a couple different things concerning depression. I want to go a little bit more into detail about causality, a little bit more about some practical, I don't want to say cures, but practical tips and pointers, things that can be helpful in dealing with, maybe even putting at bay some of the symptoms of depression and anxiety. So I want to just spend a little bit of time on that. So again, welcome to the channel. This is called the Sierra Program. Thank you so much for joining me. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and share my thoughts. One of the things that I also want to mention is that during times of high festivity and celebration, people tend to experience certain mental health crises at high numbers. There are a lot of people who feel very alone and very isolated during times of celebration and festivity, and so that can create a lot of what we see as far as mental health crises and isolation. Depression and anxiety due to the isolation and the loneliness. So let me spend a little bit of time on causality, and then I'll go into some other conversation around these things. So I believe I mentioned in a recent video that this last couple of years, interestingly enough, the medical and particularly mental health organizations, research organizations, have released information suggesting that this long-held belief that depression was somehow a chemical imbalance, that this was a flawed idea, that it wasn't based on any type of actual evidence. So I'm mentioning that because I feel it's important when having the conversation about what's creating a person's anxiety and depression. And of course, I do want to separate those two things out. Like I said, they work hand in hand. They're not the same thing. Depression is the experience of hopelessness, the experience of not just a melancholy, but it's described as a blanket darkness as a hole. A lot of times people feel like they can't climb out of. A lot of times you'll experience either sleeplessness or oversleeping, meaning you're spending a lot of time throughout your day. And really that's kind of a coping mechanism, right? Your body's trying to help you to deal with what's going on, the strenuousness of that, what's going on mentally. And while I'm having that conversation, let me mention that depression and anxiety, along with other mental health and physical illnesses, it plays into your physical, right? So like I've mentioned in many other videos, we are holistic beings. So when we're experiencing, whether it's something like maybe a lupus, for example, a cancer, something like that, that's physically diagnosed with a proper medical physician, those illnesses, because they can be long-term, particularly lupus is long-term, there's a lot of mental health overlap with those and how to process dealing with those types of chronic illnesses, right? And so the same thing is true on the reverse, when you're experiencing something like a depression, anxiety, you start to feel those physical ramifications. So, again, sleeplessness or oversleeping. You start to feel drained. You start to feel a lack of energy, a lack of interest in things. You start to feel um, worthless. You start to feel like there's nothing going to help you in this situation, that you can't get out of this situation, that you are just so overwhelmed by what's going on within your own mind that it begins to just drain your physical body. So that's sort of a very collapsed, if you will, explanation of depression. And then you have the anxiety side of things, where anxiety causes you to feel constrained and restrained in a lot of ways. So when you have that playing, it's like, I don't want to go into public. I don't want people to know what's going on, what I'm experiencing. And so you're trying to cover up and you're trying to hide what you're experiencing. So that creates a lot of anxiety because you don't want to be found out. You feel like there's a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment and discomfort for people to express, even in this day and age where we're becoming a little bit more open about talking about mental health and things like that. It's still very, again, isolating is the word that I would use to describe it, because you always feel like, not only do you feel like you're alone in these things, you also feel like, I don't want to burden other people with what I'm experiencing. And so that not wanting to burden, not wanting to place it off on other people, again, stigmatizes you. It isolates you more. And so you can be out and about, should you have the energy to actually force yourself to go out and be around other people, and yet still feel, I've seen the commercial that was promoting a particular medication where the young lady was like, oh, I'm out and I'm around people, but yet I still feel very alone. And so there's this two-sidedness where you're trying to pretend that you're not experiencing these symptoms, and so you'll force yourself to be a part of a group, and yet you're still suffering very much so on the inside and not sharing with anybody. So I'm going to come back and hit on an important part of that in a moment, or later in the video. So those are kind of your distinctions: your depression, your anxiety. Again, they tend to go hand in hand a lot of times, right? If you're experiencing one, you're experiencing the other, and it's very unfortunate how that happens. So let me do a little bit of an interesting take here. So again, the medical mental health profession has released recently these ideas and these thoughts that depression is not a chemical imbalance. So if that's true, then what is it? Where's it coming from? And not only that, what is the remedy for it? Because based off of this idea of a chemical imbalance, we've had over 20 years of medicating via antidepressants, which are an attempt to now balance out whatever chemicals were supposed to have been imbalanced, right? And now the information is saying, no, there's no imbalance. But we're still prescribing these antidepressants that are supposed to address this supposed imbalance. Okay. So here are some things that we know have been found to really alleviate certain symptoms. Now, before I kind of go into some of the things that are known to alleviate, let me pause for a moment and say, causality. Like I said, a lot of times people experience high rates of depression around festive celebratory times. So your holidays, Christmas, Valentine's, things like that. Times when It is supposed that people are to be around, say, family, friends, groups. Excuse me, people can feel very uncomfortable that, oh, I'm supposed to be with a group, I'm supposed to be in community, and perhaps they don't feel that they have a true community. This is a complaint that a lot of people have. And so whenever I'm addressing an individual in therapy, and when we're assessing persons in therapy, one of the things that we ask about is their social life, their community. What communities are you involved in? So, again, times of celebration, times of stress, high stress, right? So whether you have a job that's very high stress, you're experiencing financial difficulty, housing difficulties, even some type of familiar, meaning a relational strain, can be times that people experience. And let me just be clear that majority of humanity experiences depression on some level at some point. That being said, there is a distinction between, experiencing a brief period of depression or experiencing kind of feeling depressed versus like the clinical version of depression, right? And we look at the clinical nature of depression based off of how much this is impacting your day-to-day life. So if you're experiencing these symptoms more often than not, and it's affecting whether you're able to, say, work or be involved in a group or some type of a hobby or, social activity, if you're feeling like you're retreating from life as opposed to being a part of life, then these are, reasons that we would want to go forward with addressing what you're experiencing and, make some recommendations and suggestions about what you can do. So that being said, those are, by the way, while I'm on that topic, winter. We do know that seasonal depression is a very real thing. And so people do experience when we don't have as much sunlight, because we know that sun does offer us some important vitamins. So when we're not experiencing the ability to be outside as much because it's colder, it's gloomier, it does play a huge part on our overall mood. And so we do experience seasonal depression, and we see that quite vividly in our data. So here are some things, and I'm gonna kind of go back and forth as far as addressing some of the causation and then some recommendations, right? So first of all, none of my videos are to be taken as advice, as clinical advice. I would always say you want to go and sit before a professional. You want to have the proper assessments done. You want to, follow those necessary steps in order to address whatever it is you're experiencing. These videos are for informational purposes only, right? So that you can kind of think about, okay, am I experiencing this? Have I experienced this? What are some next steps? That being said, if you're experiencing any type of mental health crises, there are resources out there for you. So we do have crisis hotlines, suicide hotlines, things of that nature that you can contact. There are, at your local hospital, sections, I should say, within the local hospital, or a division, a department within that local hospital that ought to be able to assess and help you as well. So you can call or contact your local hospital or clinic or what have you if you're experiencing any type of mental health crisis. Okay, so setting aside this idea of a chemical imbalance and saying, okay, maybe I'm experiencing a seasonal depression, or I'm experiencing depression because I feel isolated, I don't have a family or community, and here it is, this celebratory time, and people are supposed to be upbeat and feeling very lively. Here are some principles. As much as you may not want to get outside or do something that involves being around other people, it is very pertinent to do so, because the experience of depression is very inward, right? That means you're spending a lot of time ruminating. You're internally going through all of these different things that are happening in your own world, and what you're experiencing is very self-centered. When you go out and you are allowing yourself to be around others, to be in community, whatever that might look like for you, and that's one of kind of the neat things about this time of year that makes people feel good, is because there are all these charities and opportunities to volunteer and to be around and to do things, right? And so people tend to feel more giving around this time of year, and it makes them feel good that they gave, and it makes other people happy because someone gave to them, right? So there's this yin and yang, if you will, that happens. And so when we force ourselves to get out among other people, we tend to feel better. That's just a known, that when we're helping other people, when we're around other people in a way that gets us outside of ourselves, it increases our mood. It releases those chemicals, those things that we would want to have released, that are going to increase what we're feeling. Another reason you want to get out, exercise is highly important, because again, it's releasing certain chemicals. It's allowing your brain and your body to reconnect and to find some balance. And so when that happens, that also increases your mood. So like I said, whenever we're assessing someone in practice, we're always asking about those social elements. You know, do you have a friend group? Do you have what we call important protective factors? You know, people that you can call upon when you're feeling down, when you're feeling unlike yourself. People that you can turn to, or, you know, whether it's a faith group, a community group, a family group. And family, it could be a best friend that you consider like family. You know, those things have different definitions and look different for different people. So those are things that we want to look for and look towards. One of the other things I want to say about depression and anxiety, right? The symptoms are all, and notice the word that I used. These are mood, what we label, categorize as mood disorders. It's affecting your mood, which is how you feel. It is a known fact that our emotions, our feelings, are not static, meaning they don't stay the same. Our emotions, our feelings are constantly changing. We're constantly experiencing shifts and dynamic movement within our emotions. The last video that I did, I talked a lot about how, like, women, because we have children, we experience menstrual cycles, we go through menopause, like all of these different variations of physical things happening within the body are relating back to mood and how we're feeling at any given time throughout our life cycle. Well, when we're talking about a mood disorder, again, we're talking about feelings. We're talking about something that's shifting, that's dynamic, that's moving, it's not staying the same. So I'm saying that and spending some time on that because I want to encourage anyone who's experiencing this deep hole, this experience of melancholy, that it's not going to stay the same. You may experience it now, and then something happens in your life that begins to create a shift for you. You find a new job, you move to a new place, you go on a hiking trip or a ski trip, whatever it is. All of a sudden that mood, which is really not all of a sudden, but that mood shifts, it changes, right? And one of the things when we're talking about like a clinical depression, right, we're going to see a movement, kind of like this, right, a wave. So going back to some causality, situational depression. I mentioned that a moment ago. Maybe you lost a job, you lost a loved one, you lost a pet, you lost a home, something like that. A lot of times depression is experienced around loss, which makes perfect sense, right? Depression can be experienced around a feeling or a sense of unfulfillment. Things are just not going the way that I want them to go. That can create a lot of depression. So, again, these things are not static. They're not going to remain the way that they are. So, yeah, I might feel unfulfilled at the moment. However, again, that can shift, that can change because I put myself maybe in a situation where I accidentally bump into the secret Santa, or maybe not even secret Santa, maybe I want to say, the bell ringer, and have a random conversation with the person that's ringing the bell outside of the store, and I'm encouraged to volunteer. So now I'm giving back, which brings me back to that thing about stepping outside of oneself, not ruminating so much on the thoughts of your own experience and the thoughts of, how alone you are. Because the thing about the cycle of depression is depression wants to convince you that you are so alone, that no one knows what you're going through, that you continue to put yourself in a situation where you withdraw more and more. And absolutely, it's not even a true thing that no one knows, because again, majority of humankind has experienced some form of depression on some level at some point. That's just fact. Okay, so those are some causalities. I want to go back for a minute because, again, there are a lot of meds being prescribed for something that's supposed to be a chemical imbalance, or was thought to be a chemical imbalance, which is now being said is not a chemical imbalance, so, if you're taking medication and this medication is not helping anymore, and you feel like it was at one point, you want to speak to your provider about that. If you feel like you want to no longer take the medication, make sure that you're talking to your doctors, your providers about tapering. Because if you've been on this medication for an excessive amount of time, it has impacted those chemicals within the brain and within your body. And so you want to make sure that you don't abruptly make any changes of that sort. Another thing that we know for a fact can be very impactful in dealing with anxiety and depression is diet. One thing you want to stay away from, alcohol, and a lot of people use alcohol as a coping mechanism. If you're experiencing depression, alcohol is the worst thing that you want to do because alcohol is a depressant. It's going to create more depression. It lowers your inhibition. It lowers all of your, it's a downer. It's a depressant. Like, it lowers all of your capacity for caring. And I guess that's kind of the draw to it. But if you tend to be more on the depressed side, that's something you don't want to do. You definitely want to stay away from a lot of sugars, refined sugars, a lot of processed things, because that's also going to create a lot of unnecessary imbalance. And so you want to be cautious about what you're eating. You want to try and eat a lot of veggies, right? Really nutrient-rich veggies. You want to stay away from the processed vegetables and foods and eat those things that are going to have some sort of a content of the micronutrients and the nutrients that the body needs. That's important. There's a lot of research now going on about, to the extent that, diet is as important as it is, how much what we ate or how we ate back when we were more of an agricultural society versus now, the rates of different things then versus now. And, as we've kind of shifted into more of a fast-paced society, how that's played a lot into what we experience as far as mental health. Because, again, we're not outside as much. We're not as physically engaged as we once were, with the land, with nature, what have you. We weren't getting the nutrients from the sun. We're not now getting the nutrients from the sun. We're not now getting the exercise that our bodies require, that movement that we require, that physical engagement that we require. And so those things definitely create, and we're so fast paced, right? We're not taking time out, as it were, to stop and smell the roses, right? And so when we don't do that, we are missing out on a huge opportunity. We have to learn to slow ourselves down. We have to learn to really take time out to truly recharge. And so when we do that, we will experience higher rates of stability within our mood versus those plummeting mood changes that we experience. So those are some really key things that I wanted to point to as far as depression. And I didn't spend as much time on the anxiety bit as I, maybe in the next couple videos I'll kind of expound on that a little bit more. But yeah, this is where we're at, and this is what I wanted to talk about because it's super important, especially right now, to talk about these things. And I do want to wish everyone a happy holiday, a Merry Christmas, and a happy Hanukkah, even though I know Hanukkah's technically been celebrated already. And I want you to be well. So hopefully you will ponder and consider some of these points. Drop some questions, comments for me, and hopefully we can address them in some upcoming videos. Till next time.